So the next thing I want to look at is using ISESteroids to generate functions from scripts that you've already written. So I've got a small script that I've written here for um, a small script here for setting a user's photo in Active Directory. And this thumbnail photo comes through in Outlook and Link and possibly SharePoint if they're all pointing at AD. And what that thumbnail photo is actually a representation of all of the pixels in a JPEG picture. So basically you're grabbing the picture, which is the path to a JPEG file, encoding it as bytes, and then chucking that into a property in Active Directory. So this, for example, would be something like um, .jpeg, and my identity would be something like Joshua. So for every user and every picture, I'd have to come in here and edit the path of the photo, edit the identity, and then run the script. So the first thing to making that the first step in making that a little bit more portable is if we just go back to what was already there. So I've got a variable there for identity and a variable for picture. And what I'm going to do is at the top of the script go picture equals something. We'll say it's on the file store server, photos, staff, default. So on our file server we've got a default JPEG picture. And we also have our identity. And for now I'll just put myself in there. So that's the basics of the script. We've now made it a little bit easier to reuse it for different people. Now we just need to come in here and edit that, and click run without worrying about where it fits in to the script itself. But what ISESteroids lets you do is if we highlight it all, right click, go to refactor, and then turn into function, you'll get a dialog box like this, and it's going to give you a list of all of the approved verbs. So it's right away making sure that you stick with the best practice and only use the approved verbs rather than making something up. So we're going to use set, because that's what the function's doing. It's setting a attribute in AD, and we'll do set user set staff photo. And what ISESteroids has done is it's picked out what it assumes as parameters. So for the most part that's going to be anything that is a variable name equals, and that's used later on in the script. Now for us, photo isn't going to be a parameter because that's something that the script's um, working on based on the parameters that we provide up above. So we'll turn off photo, but we'll leave on picture and identity, and we'll tell it to open it in a new script. And it's dumped it into a function template. So right away it's given us function with the name that we specified. It's given us a template for the comment based help. It's given us the commandlet binding, which is the best practice for doing a function. It just gives you some nice freebies basically for extra functionality for your functions. And it's put our two parameters up into a parameter block and put the rest of it down here. And it's picked out what it assumes to be the default values from here. And because there's default values, it's set things to false. So I only have to do a little bit of work to get this, to finish this off how I want it. I'm actually going to move identity above picture. And I don't want identity to have a default value, so it is going to be mandatory, and it's going to be on position 0. And I prefer my parameter blocks to look like that, and like that, and I don't need system dot there. And this is a case where that temporary guide could be handy as well. Just lining up the parameter properties. So identity is mandatory, and I can provide it in position 0, and picture is not mandatory, and I can provide it in position 1. So now we have set staff photo, and if we run it like this, because it's been set up with commandlet binding and parameters and everything, if we run it, it knows identity is mandatory, and it'll prompt us to include the identity. I'm not going to run that because I don't actually have any photos available for chucking into AD. And it also means we have help for set staff photo. So there's the name. Synopsis is, like it says there, the short description, and that's coming from this template we have here. Same with the description, the examples, all of that. So it's showing the syntax there, identity first, and those square brackets are telling you that identity, the name itself, is optional, but you have to supply a string for the for that first parameter. And same with that, the picture name is optional, but then so is the whole property. And then default value shown there, examples, obviously not filled out yet. um, cool, so that's a simple script, and I might actually save that because that could be quite handy. So the next, I'm going to do the same thing again, but for a somewhat more complicated script. This is what I was working on as as I was setting up my lab. So this is basically the steps that I took to whip up my lab. So you can see I've already broken things out. Computer name set to Cyclone, switch name set to external switch. And the first time I ran this, I needed to set up that the switch. But then after that, I didn't need it, so it's commented out. Specifying the ISO, the memory, location for the VHDs, locations for the VMs, disk size, the VMs looping through, all of that. And then this is the follow-on stuff I did. So what we can do here is turn this into, say, 2 or 3 commandlets or advanced functions, and then we can add all of those functions to a module. So first of all, we have this block here. So same thing again, highlight it, right click, refactor, turn into function. And this will be new, new, if I knew my alphabet, new lab VM. So common name, sorry, computer name, yes, that's actually probably more, that would be more accurate to say server name, because it's the Hyper-V server that the VMs are going to be installed on. Switch name, ISO, MEM, VHD path, disk size, VMs. Cool. So it's picked up all of the parameters that I need and nothing that I don't. So if we hit that nice and quick, we've got all of our parameters, and it's picked the correct types for each of them. And because there's defaults, none of them are mandatory, and it knows that I've specified an array for VMs, so right off the bat it's gone and made that an array, and we can chuck that down to string. In fact, let's turn all of these system.strings into simply string. And the int32s just int32s for uniformity's sake. Alright. I've started, I might as well just do it. No, I'm not going to get worried about that. I was just about to start moving all of these parameter names up onto the same line um, as that, but that's going a bit overboard. Um, so that's this first command. Now we can put in a bit of smarts here and go if get VM switch computer name name switch name. If that doesn't equal null, if that does equal null, what's going on there? If that does equal null, go ahead and create it. So that's just putting in a little bit of extra logic there instead of commenting it out when we don't need it. It's going to check to see if that switch exists, and if it doesn't, it'll go ahead and create it for us. And then I don't need to change any of that there. So that's our new lab VM. Then I want to do this one here, which sets a delay for the startup. So what I did is had my AD server turn on as soon as my Hyper-V host turns on, and then after that it'll keep going down the line. And it's actually going to go in order of that array there. So I've just borrowed that from there, brought it down so that actually I'll grab computer name as well. So the reason I'm grouping them all up is so that I can highlight them all as one cohesive unit. Right click, refactor, turn it to function. So this will be set lab start delay, and those are all the my properties. And so that one doesn't need any work. I mean, I could change around the parameter blocks, but this is just an example, so I shouldn't need to. And the last one that I'll do is setting the dynamic memory, because the Windows install doesn't tend to like starting up with less than a gig from what I've seen. So when I provision them, I set the memory to a gig, and then I turn on dynamic memory so that it can throttle down to quarter of a gig or go up all the way to a full gig. And the only reason why I'm sort of trying to conserve memory like that is because this machine only has 8 gigs. Where does it show the up there? This host only has 8 gigs of memory available in total, and as you can see at the moment with just 2 VMs running, we're running pretty high. So I'm going to need to borrow computer name and VMs again. And we'll do the same thing. Refactor, turn into function, and this will be set lab dynamic mem. And same template, parameter block, commandlet binding, and the actual meat of the function. So that's all well and good. We've created our commandlets or our advanced functions. Now these three commandlets all belong to the same sort of task, we'll say. So and especially if we want to call on them without having to think about where the script's saved and importing it into the session and all of that, what you might want to do is turn these commandlets into a module. So ISESteroids helps with that as well. If you right click on the function keyword, it has right at the top export to module, and we're going to export the function new lab VM. If we had multiple in the one document, we could export all of them, or as it says there, select only some. And it knows the modules it's already dealt with, so I've done a test one and I've used this for my roadmap statistics module before, but in this case we'll create a new one, and this will be VM lab. And I'll tell it to open the module folder after export just so we can see what's going on in there. And under advanced it lets you decide whether you want to keep it in the source script file or whether you want to remove it. So when I've been exporting from one module to another or one script file to another, I've put this on remove just so I don't see it again in the original. But we'll leave that as default for now and click export. So as you can see in my documents folder, in the modules path, it's created a folder with that name I specified for the module, and it's automatically written a PowerShell a module manifest file, which looks a bit something like this, and it has a version number, unique GUID. It's got a little plug in there to say that it was created with ISESteroids. But it basically fills out the template for you for any relevant information. And what you'll notice with how ISESteroids generates its modules is that it creates a new script file for each of your functions. So this module manifest tells PowerShell to look in loader, and loader basically dot sources the individual functions. So what we'll notice if we go to our second function and go export, and we want it to go to VM lab, you'll now notice two script files there, and loader has been edited so that it's now got two in there. And the third one, again, three script files, and three .source script files. So that's a really handy way of organizing your scripts in modules so that they're easy to find like that. But to show you an example of something that's a little bit bigger, this is PowerBot, and I've use the same method for creating the module for PowerBot. So every function within PowerBot has its own script file, and the loader file has to reference each of those. So I do like the idea of segmenting out my functions into these individual files, but what I might do for PowerBot, because it's got so many functions and it's only going to get more as we go on, is I'm going to group them into common groups, for lack of a better word, and do a script file for each of those groups, and then chuck all of the advanced functions into those script files, and then edit the loader.psm1 file accordingly, despite the fact that it has big warning there, do not modify. So to see that in action, what we've just created, this is a brand new PowerShell console that I've opened, and one of the functions that we created was set lab dynamic mem, and you'll notice right away it shows up as available. It should see the same for new lab VM. Hey Google. Yeah, the bot appears to be working well now. It's actually running on a PC in another building at the moment, so it's going pretty well. And if we look at get module list available, we should see it in the list, obviously, and there it is. So script version 1.0 VM lab, and you can see the exported commands are our 3 functions that we exported.